She couldn't speak, but when she saw him, the man in the suit, she ran to him, held him tight, and wrote 2 shaky words, "Big Brother." He said he didn't know her, the world didn't believe her, but what came next? No one saw coming. If stories like this matter to you, stories about the unheard, the unseen, subscribe. Let's begin. That morning, the sky didn't shine. Nor did it rain. It just hung there gray and heavy, like someone had laid a leaden blanket over the city, muffling even the sound of breathing. People moved quickly across the cracked sidewalks, their heads down, their coffee cups steaming, their phones glowing with the latest nonsense of the day. Nobody looked twice at the girl sitting on the curb outside the corner cafe. Maybe they'd seen her too many times. Maybe they'd stopped seeing her at all. She sat there like she had always sat there. One arm wrapped around a torn canvas backpack, the other resting on her knees, fingers fidgeting with a rubber band she wore around her wrist like it meant something. In front of her was a piece of bent cardboard, warped by rain and time, with a line scribbled in shaky black marker. "I can't speak. Please help me eat today." Next to it, a small battered sketchbook, its corners water-damaged and pages curled. Inside were dozens, maybe hundreds of hand-drawn portraits. Most were of the same man, sharp jawline, distant eyes. A suit, always. A suit. In some he looked stern, in others kind. Sometimes just lost. She didn't know how many times she'd drawn that face. It haunted her fingertips. She sketched it the way people write down dreams before they fade desperate not to forget. As if every stroke might bring back something real. Something she'd once had. Someone. No one knew her name. No one asked. So the neighborhood had given her one. Mira. It wasn't her real name. But a little girl once pointed at the faded fabric bracelet on her wrist and asked, "Mom, what's that say?" The mother squinted and guessed. "Looks like it says Mira, probably her name," and that was that. From that day on, she was Myra. Mira didn't speak, not because she was born mute. No, she used to speak. She used to laugh. She might have even sung once, but not anymore. The last sound she remembered was fire, screams, splintering wood. A boy's voice, sharp with fear. "Lena, run, don't stop." And then silence. Like the whole world had taken a final breath and never exhaled. Since then, her voice had never come back. Doctors called it trauma-induced mutism. Others said she was faking. But as the years passed, her lips grew still, her throat unused. Like language had given up on her, just like everyone else had. The cafe she sat in front of was a local chain, owned by a sharp-eyed woman named Leila, who didn't like Mira but didn't chase her off either. Every morning, Delilah would glance at her like you'd glance at a stain on the wall, not ugly enough to scrub, not clean enough to ignore. "As long as she doesn't bother customers," she muttered. "No begging, no scenes." The customers didn't care. They walked past her like she was part of the building, a statue that sometimes blinked, a fixture on the curb. They didn't see the sketchbook. They didn't see the way she tensed every time a man in a gray suit passed by. They didn't see the way she waited. And then, one Tuesday morning, at exactly 8:23 a.m., everything changed. The black Lexus parked across the street, polished so well it mirrored the world back at itself. A man stepped out. Suit tailored, shoes clean, watch gleaming under the early sun. Mira looked up. Her eyes widened. Her whole body jolted like she'd been struck by lightning. Breath caught in her throat. It was him, the man from her drawings. The face that lived in her dreams. Without thinking, she jumped to her feet. Her backpack hit the ground. Pages from her sketchbook flew into the street like leaves caught in wind. She ran. The man barely had time to glance sideways before her arms wrapped around him like a vice. She didn't speak. She didn't scream. She just clung to him, silent, shaking, breath stuttering in gasps against the lapel of his tailored coat. People on the sidewalk slowed. Some stopped. One woman muttered, "Is that his daughter?" Another, frowning, whispered, "No, that girl's homeless. I've seen her before." The man stiffened, confused, one hand rising instinctively in self-defense. He pulled back just enough to get a look at her face. Brown eyes wide, tear-lined, familiar. Too familiar. "Excuse me," he started, but she was already reaching into her back pocket, fingers trembling, pulling out a crumpled piece of paper and a pen with its cap long gone. She scribbled, the ink shaky, the pressure uneven. When she was done, she held it up to his chest with both hands. 2 words, "Big Brother." His entire posture shifted. He took a step back like she'd just hit him. "I don't know who you are," he said flatly. He looked around. People were watching. Now phones were starting to lift. The modern jury, trial by camera. His voice dropped into that sharp, businesslike tone of someone who's done with nonsense. "You need to let go of me. Right now." But Mira didn't move. Tears slipped silently down her cheeks, not dramatic, not pleading, just honest. Her body trembled as if everything inside her was breaking loose all at once. She stared at him like someone clinging to the edge of a memory too fragile to speak aloud. He snapped his fingers, turned to the cafe's owner. "Does anyone know her?" Delilah, standing at the doorway holding a damp rag, shrugged like this happened every other Tuesday. "She doesn't talk," she said. "Been hanging around this street for years. Calls nobody anything. Draws in that little book of hers. I think her mind's not all there." She said, "I'm her brother." Delilah raised an eyebrow. "Well, that's new." Mira was still, standing there, paper in hand, still staring, still not blinking. The man sighed. He pinched the bridge of his nose. "Look," he said, voice strained but calm. "My name is Lucas, Lucas Reeve. I'm a partner at Argento and Hall, a real estate law firm. I've never met you before in my life." But the paper in her hand didn't change. "Big Brother." The police arrived 7 minutes later. A pedestrian had called it in. Some girl attacking the businessman. "I think she's mentally ill." By the time the squad car pulled up, Mira was sitting again on the curb, her arms wrapped tightly around her knees like she'd been carved out of grief. Lucas was on the phone, pacing a short distance away, muttering something about legal liability and potential harassment. The officers approached carefully. 1 male, 1 female. The kind of pairing that suggested calm and control. The woman officer crouched next to Mira. "Sweetheart, are you okay? Did you hurt yourself?" Mira shook her head. She reached for her pen and scribbled on the same piece of paper, the edges now damp from her hands. "I know him. He's my brother. My name is Mira." The officer read it, then exchanged a glance with her partner. Lucas stepped in. "Officer, I think she's confused. She mistook me for someone else. She wouldn't let go, and now people are recording. I'd like to file a statement." The officers took both sides seriously. They separated Mira and Lucas, asked questions, tried to get clear answers, but Mira couldn't speak. All she had were her drawings, her broken pen, her desperate silence. Delilah eventually handed over the cafe's security footage. "She's been sitting in front of that camera for months," she said. "Always in the same spot, always watching. Especially when he walks by." The officers leaned in. In the grainy footage, Mira sat still in her usual place. A man in a gray suit walked past. She looked up. Her eyes followed him. Her fingers moved inside her sketchbook. The next clip. A different day. Different weather. Same man. Same look. Same motion. And again. Dozens of clips. Dozens of identical reactions. One of the officers turned to Lucas. "You walk this street often?" Lucas rubbed the back of his neck. "It's on my route to work. I guess I pass here most mornings." "You remember seeing her?" He hesitated. "No, not really. I mean, maybe. I don't know." The officer gave him a long, thoughtful look. "She remembers you. That night, Mira wasn't taken to jail. She wasn't charged with anything. She wasn't sent back to the street. Instead, she was transported to a nearby hospital for observation. Psychiatric evaluation, they called it. Lucas signed a witness report, refused press questions outside, and went home. But at 3:41 a.m., he sat up in bed, sweating. A name kept echoing in his skull. Not Mira. Not Lucas. A name from a place he couldn't quite place. Lucas didn't dream often. But when he did, it was fire. Not metaphorical fire. Not a life is crumbling fire. Actual flames choking, blinding, flickering orange against black. He'd wake up gagging, tasting smoke that wasn't there. Heart racing, fingers clenched into the bedsheet like they were trying to hold on to something slipping away. It didn't happen often anymore. Maybe once or twice a year. But the night after Mira clung to him and called him Big Brother, the dream returned with vengeance. This time he was standing at the top of a staircase. Smoke coiled around his legs like snakes. Someone was screaming. And then there was that name, not Mira, not Lucas. He sat up in the darkness, hands gripping his knees. He hadn't heard that name in years, decades, or maybe never, but it felt like home, like something whispered to him in another lifetime. He got up, poured himself a glass of water, and stared out the window of his high-rise condo. Below, the city glowed as if nothing had happened. As if a mute girl hadn't clung to him that morning with a face full of memory and hope. As if he wasn't cracking apart from the inside out. Lucas hadn't always lived this way. There had been something before the tailored suits, something before the sharp jaw and sharper reputation. Something buried beneath years of discipline, performance, and forgetting. He didn't remember much of his childhood. Foster homes blur together like bad dreams. But one memory always stood out, a hand. Small, warm, always holding onto the edge of his shirt. He used to protect someone, a little girl. He used to stand between her and the yelling, the fists, the locked doors. He used to whisper stories to her at night. Stories about running away. About forests and stars and places where no one hurt you just for being born. She had a name, didn't she? No, this wasn't real. That wasn't him. That was some other life. Some other boy. He was Lucas Reeve, managing partner. Georgetown graduate. Rational, calm, composed. The man who donated to orphan charities once a year because that's what successful people did. Not a boy from a burned-down group home, not a brother. Across the city, Mira sat on a stiff hospital mattress, sketchbook in hand. She hadn't eaten the sandwich they gave her. She never ate when she felt scared. And now she felt like her insides were made of glass. They let her keep her pen for now. And her book. So she drew Lucas again. But not in a suit. This time she drew him as she remembered him. A boy, maybe. 12, messy hair. One eye bruised, the other sharp and alert. Protective. She drew herself beside him, a smaller girl, tucked beneath his arm. Hair matted. One sock missing. Gripping the hem of his shirt. Back then, she had a name too. A different one. She remembered it now. She hadn't said it in years. Not even in her head. She flipped the page and wrote it carefully, slowly, as if she might forget the letters if she wasn't careful. Elwyn Nash stared at it until tears blurred the lines. That was who she used to be. That was who she still was. The doctor who came in the next morning was younger than she expected. Late 30s, soft smile. Kind eyes behind rectangle frames. "Hi, Mira," he said, sitting down across from her. "O.R. Is that your name?" She tilted her head. He waited. She turned her sketchbook toward him and pointed at the name, Leanne Hay. Studied it, tapping his pen against his clipboard. "We pulled some records last night," he said gently. "You're not in the system, not under either name. You're like a ghost." She looked down, but there was one hit, he continued. A missing child report from nearly 16 years ago. Name, Langham Meredith, ward of the state. Listed as presumed dead after a fire in a state-run group home. No living relatives on file. Her hand trembled slightly. The doctor leaned forward. Mira, he said softly, do you remember a fire? She nodded, once. Do you remember ... a brother? A tear slipped down her cheek. She flipped to the next page in her sketchbook and showed him her drawing of the boy from before. The doctor's eyes widened slightly. I need to show you something, he said. An hour later, they pulled up the CAF footage again. The doctor had requested access to the tapes. This time, they paused it at a frame where Lucas walked by, a perfect profile. He turned to Mira. This is the man you called your brother? She nodded without hesitation. We ran his face through the juvenile archive. His real name might not be Lucas. She blinked. The doctor pulled up a photo from an old file. It was scanned and faded, but clear enough. A boy, maybe 11, with bruises under both eyes and a hand clenched tight into a fist. Labeled, Ethan Meredith. Mira gasped no sound, but her whole body jerked forward. The name hit her like a wave. Ethan. That was what she used to call him. Not Lucas. Ethan, her Ethan. Across town, Lucas stood in the elevator of his office building, staring at his reflection. His tie was perfect. His suit crisp. But he looked like a man seeing his own face for the first time. Inside his pocket was the note Mira had given him. Big brother. Why couldn't he stop thinking about it? Why couldn't he stop hearing her voice in his dreams, even if she hadn't spoken a word? Why did that sketchbook ... those eyes feel like the truth? He had a meeting in 6 minutes, but instead of walking into the conference room, he turned on his heel. He was going back to the hospital. He needed to see her again. The hospital lobby smelled like over-polished tile and over-brewed coffee. Lucas stood at the check-in counter, his hands in his coat pockets, tapping his foot without meaning to. The nurse behind the glass gave him the kind of smile people reserve for lawyers who've shown up without an appointment but with a purpose. Can I help you? She asked. I'm here to see Myra, the girl you brought in yesterday, he said. Silent, homeless. You might know her as... Well, she called me her brother, the nurse blinked. Do you have family verification? No, he admitted. A referral from her caseworker? No. The nurse gave him a look. He lowered his voice. Please, I think I might know her. I just ... I need to see her. I think there's a chance he stopped, cleared his throat. There's a chance we knew each other, from a long time ago. The nurse hesitated. Then she looked over her shoulder and said quietly, one moment. Lucas waited, heart in his throat. When the door opened 5 minutes later, it wasn't the nurse who returned. It was the young doctor from earlier, the one who'd taken Myra's drawings seriously. He studied Lucas for a beat. Lucas Reeve? Yes, the doctor didn't answer right away. Then, she's awake. Been drawing all morning. She hasn't spoken, but she's clearly communicating. Lucas nodded. I need to ask you something, the doctor said. Off the record, Lucas braced. Okay. Do you remember anything before you were adopted? Lucas blinked. Why? Because Mira, the doctor stopped himself. Her real name might be Lina. We're still verifying. But she's showing remarkable memory of someone named Ethan, a boy who protected her when they were children. A boy who vanished the same night a group home burned down 16 years ago. Lucas's mouth went dry. She believes that boy is you. They brought him to a room on the 3rd floor. It looked like a cross between a dorm and a waiting cell. White walls, thin blanket, one narrow window, and Mira sitting on the edge of the bed, sketching something with her knees drawn up. She didn't look up when he walked in. Lucas hesitated in the doorway. Mira, the doctor said gently. You have a visitor. She froze. Then slowly turned her head. Her eyes met Lucas's. And something shifted. The fear left her face. The tension in her shoulders loosened. She looked down at the drawing in her lap and held it up. Lucas stepped closer. It was a child's version of him, not in a suit, not standing tall. Just a boy, maybe 11, holding hands with a little girl in a too big hoodie. His arm around her shoulder. He swallowed. "That's me," he whispered. Her eyes welled. "I remember," he said, kneeling slowly beside the bed. "I remember your hands. They were always cold. You'd sneak into my bunk and hold my arm. You used to call me." He stopped. She mouthed the word, "Ethan." His eyes burned. "Yes," he said, his voice cracking. "Ethan, that was my name. Before they changed it. Before I became ... someone else." She reached out, fingers shaking, and touched the edge of his coat. Not to hold him. Just to make sure he was real. He didn't pull away this time. The doctor stepped quietly out of the room. He didn't want to break it. Whatever was happening in there was more healing than anything he could prescribe. Outside, the hallway was quiet. A social worker walked by, checking a clipboard. Someone pushed a mop bucket slowly past the elevators. Just another Tuesday. Except a lost brother had found his sister. And a mute girl had finally been heard. Lucas didn't know how long he sat. Their time stopped mattering in that small white room, where two people who shouldn't have remembered each other did. He watched Myra's fingers move in slow, deliberate gestures, trying to shape words she couldn't speak. It was like her body remembered what her voice had forgotten. She mouthed syllables, pointed at her sketches, touched the name she had written again and again. "Ethan, Lucas, no." Ethan was quiet for a long time. "I didn't remember until you grabbed me," he finally said. "Even then I thought it was just a mistake, some coincidence." He looked down, but it wasn't. "It was you." Myra blinked fast, her eyes shining. She opened her notebook again and flipped to a page he hadn't seen yet. It was a burned building, all jagged lines, and black shading crayons or charcoal smudged like ash. There were two stick figures in front of it. One tall, one small. Holding hands, he felt the breath leave his chest. "The fire," he whispered. "I remember now." It had started with screaming. Someone had broken a bottle. The night staff had left early again. There was a fight between one of the older boys and a supervisor, a terrifying man named Rellan, who ran the place like a prison. Then came the smell of gasoline. Then flames. He remembered grabbing Lina Mira by the wrist and pulling her down the hallway, his own legs burning from heat and fear. He remembered telling her to run, that he'd find her later, that she couldn't stop for anything, and then nothing. He must have passed out, or been pulled away, or ... Somehow, he ended up in a hospital across the state line, with no ID. No file. Just John Doe. A clean slate. He was adopted 3 weeks later by a wealthy couple who couldn't have children of their own. They renamed him Lucas and told him to forget the past. He did. Until today. Later that night, the doctor returned with a thin manila folder. "I had one of our interns dig through the state archives," he said, "and we found this." He laid the folder on the table between them. Inside was a photocopy of a missing child report, filed 17 years ago. Subject: Lina Meredith Dobb, 12/13, missing since. Unknown. Presumed dead. Location: St. Jude's Home for Children. Notes: fire destroyed building. 3 bodies unidentifiable. 4 survivors accounted for. Lina not among them. Lucas skimmed the page. His pulse quickened when he saw the photo. A younger Mira, big eyes, tangled hair. The same sadness in her gaze. But what chilled him was what the doctor said next. "There's no record of an Ethan Meredith ever being reported missing." Lucas froze. "What?" "We searched all the archived reports tied to the fire. Nothing. It's like you never existed. But I lived there," he said. "I was there that night." The doctor's voice dropped. "If what you're saying is true, Someone erased your name from that fire. Someone deliberately excluded you from the reports. Lucas stared at him. Why would anyone do that? I don't know, the doctor said slowly. But it wasn't a clerical error. He pulled out another sheet. This is the log of the staff on duty that night. Every name has a record. Every name except one. He tapped a line. Supervisor, Relin K. Record. Expunged. Lucas stood on the sidewalk outside the hospital an hour later. The manila folder clutched under his arm. The city hadn't changed. Cars passed. People scrolled on phones. Lights blinked through the glass towers, but Lucas felt different now. As if he'd stepped into someone else's life and realized it was his all along. He looked back at the hospital window. Mira's room. She'd fallen asleep on her bed, clutching the sketchbook like it was the only thing tethering her to this world. He made a promise. Standing there in the cold night air, I'm going to find out what happened to us. To you. To me. He turned, started walking, the city swallowing him up like it always did. But this time, he walked with purpose. He wasn't just Lucas Reeve anymore. He was Ethan Meredith. And he had a sister to protect. Again. Lucas didn't look at himself in mirrors the same way after that night. Before Mira. Before that sketchbook. Before the fire came crawling back into his bones. He used to check his reflection like a checklist. Shirt tucked. Hair styled. Tie straight. Eyes sharp. Smile neutral. Perfect for courtrooms, conference rooms, or any kind of room where truth could be bent and polished like a closing statement. But now, when he looked in the mirror, all he could think was, who the hell are you, Lucas? Ethan? Was there a difference? Maybe. It was in the way his shoulders had started to sag, the way his breath caught every time he saw a little girl holding her brother's hand on the street. Or maybe it was in the way he couldn't stop hearing her voice, except she had never spoken. He still heard it, Ethan. Not from her mouth, but from the way she moved. The way she shook when she drew. The way her eyes begged for him to remember something he had no business forgetting. He sat alone in his condo, lights off, city lights bleeding through the blinds. The manila folder was spread out across the floor, pages of a life he didn't remember. No correction. Pages of a life someone had tried very hard to erase. No record of Ethan Meredith. No file. No school ID. No foster paperwork. Nothing. Except Mira. Except the fire. Except the hand he remembered holding. At 3:17 a.m. Lucas opened his laptop and searched something he hadn't dared type before. How to access sealed adoption records in New York State. The first dozen links were legal forums, red tape, dead ends. But one name kept appearing on message boards, quietly dropped like breadcrumbs. Dawn Harrington, private investigator. She specialized in unsealing the past. Lucas sent her an email. Subject: request for urgent consultation, adoption case. He included no details. Just a phone number and a single line. I think someone erased me. He hit send, closed the laptop, and stared into the dark until the sky changed color. The hospital cafeteria was nearly empty when Mira walked in with a nurse by her side. She still didn't speak, but she walked differently now, not fast but more grounded. Like the cement beneath her feet wasn't going to vanish. The nurse helped her to a corner table, gave her a tray. Soup, crackers, a banana. Simple. Myra ignored the food and opened her sketchbook. Page after page, she drew the boy again. The same boy with the same bruise over his eyebrow, and the same protective arm around her. She drew the fire again too, but less of it now. The edges didn't flare as violently. The shadows weren't so dark. She started using more gray, less black. Across from her, a janitor passed with a radio playing soft 70s pop. Normally she blocked it out. But today, the song caught something inside her chest. Don't give up on us, baby. The words weren't hers, but she mouthed them anyway. The nurse looked up in surprise. What was that? Mira looked startled. Guilty almost, but the nurse smiled. Do that again. She shook her head. Try. Mira opened her mouth. Nothing. King dot, but then, like wind behind a broken window, something slipped through. A sound, not a word. Just a breath that knew it used to be one. The nurse's eyes watered. That's a start. She whispered. Don Harrington looked like someone who could find a missing plane and still make it home for dinner by 6. She wore old boots, drank black coffee like it owed her money, and kept her hair tied in a no-nonsense bun that looked like it could cut glass. Her office was above a pawn shop in the Bronx. Lucas climbed the creaky stairs and knocked twice. She answered before the second knock finished. You're the one with the ghost file? Yes. She let him in without another word. Dawn moved like she'd already solved half the mystery. She flipped through the manila folder while Lucas sat across from her, trying not to look nervous. No birth certificate. No pre-adoption ID. Just a name change signed by a judge who's been dead for 7 years. She whistled. You're not adopted, she said bluntly. You were relocated. Lucas blinked. What's the difference? Adoption means someone wanted you, paper trail, oversight, approval. Relocation means someone needed you to disappear. Fast. She leaned forward. Let me guess, rich parents, fancy school. No baby photos. Lucas stared. Dawn cracked her knuckles. Someone paid good money to make sure Ethan Meredith didn't exist anymore. She stood and walked to a filing cabinet, pulling out a dusty binder marked St. Jude's Home for Children, incident reports. I did some digging last night, she said. The fire that destroyed your group home? No arson report. No charges, no trial, not even a suspect. But it wasn't an accident, Lucas said. I know, Dawn replied. Because I tracked down a woman who used to work there. Lucas sat up. You found a survivor? Not just that. I found someone who remembers you. She was a cook, Dawn said. Worked part-time at St. Jude's Home for Children. Only lasted a year. Quit 2 months before the fire. Lucas narrowed his eyes. Why'd she leave? She wouldn't say at first. But I got her talking. Dawn slid a notepad across the desk. A name scribbled in blocky handwriting. Ruth Kessler, age 61, address 3409 Fay Street, Yonkers. She's a tough old bird. You should go see her. She's not great on the phone, and I'm pretty sure she still thinks the internet is a government trap. Lucas nodded slowly, reading the name over and over. His pulse ticked louder behind his ears. Did she mention me by name? No, Dawn said. But when I showed her your photo, she turned pale. Lucas exhaled. When can I go? Dawn looked at the clock. Right now, if you want. She's waiting. Ruth Kessler lived in a small rusted trailer at the edge of a forgotten lot. It was surrounded by stacks of old newspapers, half-wilted potted plants, and a faded lawn flamingo with only one leg. The place looked like time had abandoned it, but the front steps were swept clean, and a wind chime twinkled gently by the door. Lucas knocked once, then again, then heard the click of a chain. Unlatching. The door creaked open. A woman in a blue robe stood behind the screen door. Her face lined like old parchment, hair in a tight bun, eyes sharp as needles. You're the boy, she said. Before he could speak, Lucas blinked. You're the one who used to read bedtime stories to that little girl, the one with the drawings. He nodded. Heart THUDING. Ruth stepped back and waved him in. Her living room smelled like menthol and lemon polish. The couch sagged in the middle, and a radio played softly from the kitchen. She poured tea without asking. I told your investigator lady I didn't want to get involved, Ruth said, voice rough like gravel. But when she showed me your photo, it all came rushing back. Lucas sat stiffly on the edge of the couch. I remember you, she said. You were maybe 10. Always sitting by the wall, protecting that girl. What was her name? Lila. No, Lina. Lucas's hands gripped his knees. She didn't talk. Much. Drew a lot. You were her shadow. Wouldn't let anyone near her if you could help it. Not even the staff. What do you remember about the night of the fire? Lucas asked, barely above a whisper. Ruth didn't answer right away. She stood, walked to an old bookshelf, and pulled down a dusty photo album. Flipping it open, she turned the page until she found what she was looking for. A photo of 5 children lined up on a staircase. 2 of them Lucas recognized instantly. Him and Mira. He stared. His younger self stared back, skinny, unsmiling, one hand clenched into a fist. Mira, Lena beside him, arms folded, eyes wary. Lucas swallowed hard. Where did you get this? I took it myself, before I quit. Why'd you quit, Ruth? She sat down slowly, sighing like someone dropping a weight she'd carried too long. Because I saw things that weren't right. She looked him dead in the eyes. Children went missing. Some came back hurt. Others didn't come back at all. Lucas felt something cold crawl up his spine. One night I heard screaming in the basement. They said it was just a fight. But when I went down there, Relin had 3 boys tied up. Said they were thieves. Said they needed punishment. Relin? Lucas said. The supervisor? Ruth nodded. But he wasn't just that. He ran that place like it was his personal kingdom. He had keys to every room, every file. And I swear to God, he had a deal with someone outside. Agencies. People who came at night to take certain kids. Lucas's hands balled into fists. Did anyone report it? I tried. Called child services. They told me it was being handled internally. Next week, I was asked to resign. She tapped the photo. But I remembered you and Lina, always together. When the fire happened, they said everyone accounted for was listed. She looked down, but I never saw your name in the papers. Not once. Lucas stared at the image. They erased me, he whispered. They erased a lot of things, son. Ruth leaned in, voice dropping. But maybe they didn't get everything. There's one more person you need to find. Who? She stood, limped to a drawer, and pulled out an old visitor logbook. Pages yellowed. Ink faded. She flipped to a date, 2 weeks before the fire. One signature circled. Robert Halden, State Adoption Agency. That man, she said, came to visit Relin twice. Always in secret. Never through the front. I saw him once slip an envelope into Relin's coat pocket. Lucas read the name again. Robert Halden. It was a start. It was more than he had. Yesterday. Lucas left Ruth's trailer with the photo album clutched tight under his arm. He hadn't made it back to his car before he noticed the white sedan idling across the street, tinted windows, engine running. No one got out. He paused. The driver's window rolled down half an inch. Enough to show Lucas what he wasn't supposed to miss. A folded piece of paper held against the glass. It read, "Stop looking. Stay, Lucas. Forget Ethan." Then the car drove off. The hospital room was quiet when Lucas returned. Mira was sitting cross-legged on her bed, sketchbook open in her lap, lost in whatever world she was trying to draw back into existence. She didn't hear the door open. Lucas stood there for a moment, watching her. The pencil moved slowly across the page, her brows furrowed in a way that mirrored the concentration of someone trying to rebuild a shattered vase, one shard at a time. He cleared his throat softly. She looked up, eyes locked. She didn't smile. But she didn't flinch either. That was progress. Lucas walked in slowly, holding the photo album like it might fall apart in his hands. He sat down in the chair next to her bed and placed it between them. Mira tilted her head. He opened to the page Ruth had shown him. The one with the staircase. The one with them on it. As soon as she saw it, her fingers flew to her mouth. She stared at the photo so long, Lucas started to worry she couldn't breathe. But then, she reached out. Not for the photo. For his hand. She gripped his fingers like she had as a child. Not to pull him somewhere, but to make sure he wouldn't disappear. He squeezed back, harder than he meant to. Lucas pointed to the boy in the photo, then to himself, then he pointed to the little girl beside him. Mira pressed a hand to her chest, then to the image. Tears welled in her eyes, but she didn't look away. She seemed anchored. More than that, seen. For the first time since the fire. Since the world took her voice, and her name, and her family. Mira was staring at proof that she had not imagined it all. The fire was real. The boy was real. Her brother was real. She reached for her sketchbook and flipped to a blank page. She drew a simple picture. 2 stick figures holding hands. She labeled them. Ethan, Lena, and next to it, in smaller shaky letters, still here. They sat like that for a long time. No words, no explanations. Just the kind of silence that doesn't hurt anymore. Lucas eventually cleared his throat. There's more. Mira looked up. He told her about Ruth, about the missing reports, about the man named Robert Halden, about the white car, the threat. He watched her closely as he spoke. Watched the way her body tensed at the mention of Relin. The way she rubbed the side of her wrist. An old scar, maybe. Or a reflex from something deeper. But she didn't look away. When he finished, she wrote one word on the corner of her sket key, TVD. Fight. Lucas blinked. You want to fight this? She nodded once. Firmly, he let out a shaky laugh. Okay, he sighed. We fight. Dawn met Lucas in a small coffee shop in Harlem 2 days later. She was already seated. 3 cups of coffee in front of her. 2 full, 1 empty. You're late, she said, not looking up. Lucas sat. You always order for your enemies? She finally looked at him. I order for people who are about to get their lives turned upside down. She slid a folder across the table. Robert Halden, she said. Used to work at the state adoption oversight board. Resigned quietly 6 months after the fire. Pension intact. Record spotless. Which, frankly, is suspicious as hell. Lucas opened the file. Inside, a driver's license. Tax documents, a partial address. He lives in Delaware now. Real low profile. No social media. Works as a consultant for a family placement service. No public footprint. Lucas looked up. You think he's dirty? Dawn sipped her coffee. I think he knows exactly what happened to you. And I think you showing up again scares the hell out of him. Lucas nodded. Then it's time we meet. Lucas didn't tell Mira everything before he left. Just that. He was going away for a day or 2. She didn't like it. But she nodded. Instead, she handed him a small folded paper before he left. It wasn't a drawing. It was a word. Just one. Remember. He drove through the night, Delaware-bound, GPS, guiding him through sleepy towns and endless rows of trees that looked like teeth in the dark. Halden's house was neat. Too neat. Suburban sprawl, identical lawns. Cars washed to perfection. Lucas waited until morning. Then rang the doorbell. The man who answered was older than the photo. Hair thinner. Eyes warier. Mr. Halden? Lucas asked. Yes? I think you knew me a long time ago. Halden squinted. Should I? Lucas stepped forward, his voice steady. My name was Ethan Meredith. Halden's face drained of color. And then, he slammed the door. Lucas didn't move. He knocked again. And again. Then said through the wood, I remember the fire. I remember St. Jude's. I remember Mira, and I'm not going away. A pause, then a voice through the door. Come back tonight, alone. The neighborhood was quiet by nightfall. Lucas parked 2 blocks away and walked the rest of the distance on foot. He didn't know what to expect when he returned to Robert Halden's house. A confession, maybe. Or a door slammed in his face. Again, what he got was worse. The door was unlocked. Inside, the house was dark, but not empty. Lucas stepped inside slowly, quietly, the smell of coffee and aging paper hanging in the air. He called out, Mr. Halden? No answer, but light flickered from under a door down the hallway. Lucas moved forward. fingers brushing the walls for balance, until he reached what looked like a study. The door was cracked open. Inside, Halden was seated at his desk, hands folded. Eyes tired. "You came," Halden said. "I said I would." The man sighed. "I shouldn't be talking to you," he said, glancing at a folder open in front of him. "This goes against everything I was paid not to remember." Lucas sat down across from him. "I'm not asking for your protection," he said. "I'm asking for the truth." Halden looked at him, really looked. And Lucas saw something. There, not guilt, not fear, grief. "Do you remember what it felt like?" Halden asked, voice low. "To be worth nothing more than a check?" Lucas didn't answer. Halden opened the folder and turned it toward him. Inside was a photocopy of a document. Stamped confidential juvenile transfer authorization. Ethan Meredith. Age 11. Status, relocated Lina Meredith. Age 6. Status, deceased presumed. Lucas's hands shook as he flipped the page. There was a check receipt. $10,000. Labeled, emergency reassignment fee. "Who paid for this?" Halden exhaled. "Your adoptive father." Lucas felt the air thicken around him. He knew? "No," Halden said quietly. "He didn't. Not the full story. He was told you were a ward of the state who'd been removed from a toxic environment, that your file had to be sealed for your protection." Halden ran a hand through what was left of his hair. "They used to do it all the time," he whispered. "Move kids, burn records, rewrite lives. For the right price." Lucas closed his eyes. "And the fire?" Halden was quiet for a long time. Then finally, "Relin did that, or had someone do it. It was meant to destroy the files. Cover up what was happening in the basement. You and Lina weren't supposed to survive." Lucas's hands curled into fists. "And you did nothing." "I was a coward," Halden said. "But I kept this file. I don't know why. Maybe some part of me hoped someone like you would come knocking one day." He slid the folder across the desk. "It's yours now." Lucas stood slowly, tucking the folder into his coat. "You still believe in redemption, Mr. Reeve?" Halden asked. Lucas didn't answer. He walked out. Back at the hospital, Mira waited by the window, her legs curled under her. The sketchbook open, but untouched. She hadn't drawn since Lucas left. Instead, she traced her fingers over the same word. Again and again. Remember. She wasn't afraid this time. She was ready. When Lucas walked through the door just past midnight, she looked up and she knew. He handed her the folder. She opened it slowly, gently, as if afraid the truth might crumble in her hands. Her lips trembled when she saw the photo of them, labeled Ethan and Lina Meredith, removed from public record. He knelt beside her. "I found us," he said. Mira turned to a blank page in her book and wrote, "They tried to erase us. And under it, but we're still here." Then she looked at him, and she said it. Not mouthed it. Not gestured. She said it. Cracked, raspy, but real. "Ethan." He choked on his breath. It was the first word she had spoken aloud in over a decade. Reached for her hand. She held on tight. They weren't broken anymore, not completely. 2 weeks later, the sealed folder was submitted to a civil rights attorney Lucas had hired under Mira's name. An investigation began. Relin's last known address was traced to another state, but he'd vanished. So had 3 other names linked to the fire. Some had changed jobs. Others had changed identities. But the truth was now in motion, and it had faces, Mira and Lucas, no longer silent, no longer forgotten. They gave testimony. Quiet at first, then louder, Mira's voice shaky but growing stronger. Lucas shedding the last pieces of the name he'd borrowed. By the time the press got wind of it, the siblings had already moved to a temporary safe house outside the city. Not because they were hiding, but because healing takes time. And now, for the first time in years, they had time. In their new apartment, Mira pinned a single photo to the wall, the one Ruth had given them. 2 kids. One staircase. One fire behind them. Below it, she wrote, "We were never ghosts, just waiting to be remembered." And below that, Ethan plus Lineth. Tape hissed before it played. It was an old reel, grainy, analog, scarred with time. Found in the back of a dusty box stored in the archives of a forgotten social services annex. Deep in the city's lower district, the box had no label. Just a number, case 527J. Inside, a reel, a report, and a photo paper clip to a statement with only 2 typed words stamped in red. Unusable evidence. Lucas sat in front of the tape player, Mira beside him, her knees tucked into the chair like a child bracing for thunder. They'd come to the archive on a tip from Dawn, who had bribed a retired clerk with $200 and a bottle of gin. The room smelled of paper and mildew. The lights flickered. Somewhere in the walls, water dripped like a leaky memory. Lucas pressed play. The static came first, white noise, then the low, shifting rumble of movement. A shuffling, breathing, then a voice, male, slurred, downstairs. "They don't cry no more. Got the special room now, soundproof. Relin says it's better that way." Mira went still. Lucas's heart stopped. The voice on the tape wasn't clear, but the word Relin echoed like a gunshot. "Keep him quiet. No records, no visits. Nobody knows what's under the damn floor." Click. The tape cut off. Lucas rewound it. Played it again. Slower. Mira scribbled something in her notebook with shaking fingers. She held it up. There was a door in the basement, hidden. Relin said we couldn't go near it. Lucas nodded. Double quotes. "He told me it was for storage," she added in a second line. "But kids disappeared after being sent there." Lucas looked at her. "You saw that?" She nodded. Once. He leaned back, running a hand over his face. "We need to find what's under that floor." The remains of St. Jude's sat in a field of weeds in time. They arrived the next morning. Mira bundled in layers against the autumn wind. Lucas carrying a flashlight, gloves, and a folder of legal permission. Granted by the city's coldest clerk. The fire had happened 16 years ago, but the land had never been rebuilt. Too much scandal, not enough paperwork. The area had become what locals called a ghost block, somewhere between condemned and forgotten. Lucas stepped carefully over collapsed beams, broken bricks, and shattered glass. But beneath the mess, the foundation still stood, including the basement door, half covered in ash and caved wood, but still there. He found it near the eastern wall, a rusted metal hatch built into the floor, welded shut long ago. Black scorch marks ringed the frame. Mira pointed at it, her face pale. Lucas dropped to his knees and brushed away the soot. The lock was melted, but there were no hinges on top. It opened downward. "Help me," Lucas whispered. Mira knelt beside him. Together, they pried the hatch open. It groaned like something waking up, and the smell that rose from below wasn't smoke. It was earth, mold, damp rot, and something older. Something still breathing in the dark. Lucas clicked on the flashlight, then descended. Lucas's foot landed on the first step. It moaned beneath his weight. The staircase was made of stone, older than the rest of the building, and covered in grime that hadn't been touched in over a decade. He clicked the flashlight forward, cutting through layers of dust and shadow. Mira stayed close behind, one hand on his back, the other gripping the flashlight. She held like a weapon. Each step they took downward was like descending into a buried memory. The light flickered. Water dripped from a pipe above. Or maybe it was just condensation sliding down from the cracked foundation. 10 steps down. Then 20. At step 23, the stairs ended in a short corridor. The walls were concrete, cracked but still standing. The air was damp and cold enough to see their breath. Lucas stopped in front of a metal door. Different from the hatch above. This one was intact. There was no handle, only a heavy rusted bolt, and a faded number scratched into the surface. Room 9. Mira stepped forward. She pressed her palm against the metal. Lucas watched. She didn't cry. She didn't speak. But she trembled. And that said more than words ever could. Then, with effort, they slid the bolt. It shrieked as it gave way. The door creaked open, and the dark opened its mouth. The beam from Lucas's flashlight swept across a room with no windows. No furniture, no warmth. The first thing they noticed was the silence. Not peaceful silence. Dead silence. The kind that felt engineered, intended. The walls were covered in padding, soundproofing foam, some of it torn. Some stained. Mira stepped inside first. She shivered violently but didn't. Retreat. Lucas followed slowly, on the far side of the room. Beneath a collapsed shelf, something glinted in the dust. He knelt and reached under. His hand came back, holding something small and broken. Child's bracelet. Pink. Worn. Letters faded, but one remained. E. Lucas sat down slowly, knees buckling. This was a holding cell, he whispered. They kept them here. Mira was already flipping her sketchbook open. Hands shaking. She drew the room from memory, not from now, but from then. She drew 4 children huddled in a corner. One of them was her, the others, blurred, but real. Above them, she drew a figure, a man, tall, shadowed. RELLN. She turned the sketch toward Lucas and wrote, he would take 1 child, every few nights. Sometimes they came back, sometimes they didn't. Lucas felt his stomach turn. They never reported any of this, he muttered. None of it. He stood, pacing, the flashlight beam dancing across the floor, and that's when he saw it, etched into the far wall. Faint, but legible, a list of names, scratched by fingernails or metal or bone. One below the other. TAMIKA. Ben, Isaiah, Lina, Ethan, and then several names that neither of them recognized. Names not in any official report. Names not on the survivor list. Lucas counted 13 names total. He read them aloud. One by one. When he finished, Mira added another below them, still waiting. Back at the hospital, Mira sat on her bed in silence. Her sketchbook open to the list of names they had found underground. She didn't draw that night. She just stared. Lucas stood at the window, phone to his ear. Dawn, he said. We found the basement. It's real. Everything you suspected. It's worse. Dawn's voice on the other end was hard steel. Did you find anything physical? A child's bracelet. A wall of names. Get me photos. I'll make sure the press sees them. Lucas hesitated. What happens when they do? There was a pause. Someone's going to panic, Dawn said. Someone who thought this would stay buried. And when that happens, they'll come for you. Lucas exhaled. They already have. Outside the hospital, across the street, a white sedan idled. Again. But this time, it didn't leave, and it wasn't alone. A second vehicle was parked behind it. Different make. Same silence. Same windows rolled just low enough to see nothing. Lucas stared. Then closed the curtain. Time was running out. The sketchbook was open on Mira's lap. She sat cross-legged, her eyes distant, the tip of her pencil hovering over the page like it was waiting for permission from her memory. The room was quiet except for the low hum of the heater and Lucas pacing near the window, watching the 2 cars still idling across the street. Take your time, he said without turning. Mira didn't respond. But her hand moved. Slowly. She wrote a name. Tamika O. Then another. Benji. Short. Then Isaiah. With red shirt. Then she froze. Her hand trembled. Then she pressed the pencil down with more force than she meant to. Sam. Still breathing. Lucas turned. Sharply. He moved to her side, crouching. You remember him? She nodded. Flipped to a new page. Started sketching a boy's face from memory. Short cropped hair. Wide eyes, dimples. She underlined the name again. Sam. He survived? Lucas asked. Mira circled the word, still breathing. Lucas stood. Walked to the desk. pulled out his phone and dialed Dawn. "I need you to search for a name." He gave her the details. A pause. Dawn's voice came back, cautious. That name came up once. A Samuel D. was listed in a temporary group home 2 years after the fire, but the record ends abruptly. "Can you trace it?" "I'll try." "But Lucas, if he's alive and he saw what they were doing, he might be in hiding." Lucas looked at Mira. "No," he said. "He's not hiding. He's still waiting for someone to remember." That night, Lucas didn't sleep. He sat at the kitchen table of their temporary apartment, documents and sketchbooks spread out in front of him like a crime scene. Dawn was working on finding Sam. Mira was dozing lightly on the couch, her head resting against a pillow, sketchbook clutched like armor. Lucas's mind turned over every detail, every face, every inch of that padded basement. What was it about Room 9 that terrified the system so badly they were willing to erase the identities of children? What happened to the others? And why was Sam the only one with even a whisper of a paper trail? His phone buzzed. Dawn call on got something. Sam may be in Boston, working under alias. Found a note in a forgotten foster file. Child withdrawn. Frequent trauma episodes. Refuses to speak about fire. Guess what agency placed him? Lucas stared. SD. Felix Family Services. The same consultant firm, run by former members of the State Adoption Oversight Board. He replied, "Find a contact." "I'm going." He didn't tell Mira everything before he left, just that he had to follow a name. She understood. She always did. But before he walked out, she handed him a folded paper, this time with a new message. "Find him and bring him home." Boston was colder than New York that week. Lucas found the building easily. A low, unimpressive structure on the edge of a forgotten part of town. The kind of place where systems go to rot quietly. He walked through the doors. With a forged ID Dawn had provided, asked for Samuel D. The receptionist looked at her screen, blinked. "He doesn't work here anymore." "When did he leave?" "Month ago. No forwarding address." Lucas leaned in. "But someone's still paying him." The receptionist hesitated. "We don't give out client info." Lucas reached into his coat, flashed a badge. "Not a real one, but official enough. I'll ask one more time." 10 minutes later, Lucas had the address, a P.O. box in Dorchester, and a street name. He drove there in silence. The house was small, sagging, quiet. He knocked. Once, twice. Nothing. Then, a voice behind him. Lucas turned. Young man stood across the street, hoodie pulled over his head, backpack slung low. His face older than Myra's memory, but the eyes were the same. "Sam?" The man nodded once. Then started to run. Lucas ran. His shoes slammed against wet pavement as the figure ahead darted through an alley lined with rusted trash bins and brick walls tattooed with graffiti. "Sam!" he shouted. The name hung in the air like a question, but the man didn't stop. Not until he reached a chain-link fence at the far end of the alley. He vaulted over it in one motion, landing with a stumble. Lucas followed, less gracefully, his coat snagging on the fence, his breath turning to steam. "I'm not here to hurt you," he called. Sam slowed, not stopped, just hesitated. That moment of indecision cracked the tension wide open. Lucas stepped forward, palms raised. "My name's Lucas. I think you knew me once. But I had a different name then. Ethan Meredith." Sam turned slowly, his chest rising and falling. His eyes searched Lucas's face as if time itself had carved it unfamiliar. Then, in a whisper that sounded more like a tremor than a voice, he said, "You were the one who screamed." Lucas blinked. "What?" Sam took a step closer, trembling. "You were the one screaming when they took her. I thought you died in that fire." A gust of wind cut through the alley. Trash fluttered like ghosts at their feet. "I didn't," Lucas said. "And neither did she. Mira, Lena, she's alive." Sam's hands dropped to his sides like something heavy had been unstrapped from his soul. He let out a sound, half sob, half breath. I saw them take her into room 10. No one ever came back from room 10. Lucas frowned. Room 10? We only found room 9. Of course you did, Sam said, voice shaking. They made sure no one would ever find the other one. Room 10 was beneath it. Lucas's blood ran cold. Sam continued, now speaking in the broken rhythm of someone trying to push words through a closed door in his own mind. There was a second staircase, behind the furnace. Relin kept it padlocked. Only he had the key. That's where they took the ones they wanted to disappear. Disappear? They weren't just hurting us, Sam whispered. They were selling us, or testing something. I don't know. I just know. No one who went down there ever came back, except once. Who? Lucas asked, his voice a blade. A girl, maybe 7. She crawled out during the fire, burned, bleeding. No one believed what she saw. They said she was hallucinating. But she told me there were more rooms. Not just 10, 11, 12, maybe more. Sam collapsed onto the curb, hands over his face. She died 2 days later, infection. Lucas knelt beside him. You ran. You never told anyone. Who would believe me? Sam said, I was a ghost in the system, just like you. Just like Myra. Lucas stared into the distance, his mind now rewinding everything. The wrong records, the sealed adoptions, the erased files. The silence. Room 9 was never the end. It was the beginning. And room 10 was something darker, something deliberate, something organized. Lucas stood. You're coming with me. Sam didn't move. Why now? Because she remembers you, Lucas said. And because we're not going to let them bury this again. He reached out a hand. Sam looked up. Then took a dot back in New York. Mira waited by the window, tracing the edge of her sketchbook with one finger. Her hands were steadier now. Her voice, too. Every morning she practiced words. Not for anyone else. For herself. She whispered Ethan and fight and truth. She tried Sam for the first time that day. It caught in her throat but came out. When the knock sounded on the door at 8:43 p.m., she already knew it was them. She stood before Lucas. Even opened it. And when Sam stepped through the threshold, Mira didn't speak. She didn't have to. She ran to him and threw her arms around him. Sam froze, then buried his face into her shoulder. 17 years of silence collapsed into that one moment. 3 survivors. No longer shadows, no longer erased. And still underneath it all, Lucas knew they had only touched the edge of the truth. Because beneath room 9 and room 10 were the real monsters. And the people who paid them. They came back to the ruins just before dawn. Fog clung to the cracked sidewalks like breath held too long. And the bones of the building, what was left of St. Jude's, rose from the earth, like the ribs of a dead thing no one had bothered to bury properly. Mira wore gloves and her thickest coat, her hood up, eyes alert. Sam stayed 3 steps behind, silent but not withdrawn. And Lucas Ethan walked ahead of them both, carrying a crowbar in one hand and a folded map in the other. He hadn't slept. None of them had really. Sleep was for people who didn't have ghosts waiting beneath their feet. Sam had drawn the layout of the basement from memory. Behind the furnace, he said the night before. You have to move. It's bolted, but underneath, there's a trapdoor. No latch on top, you don't open it, you uncover it. The first light of morning filtered through the holes in the collapsed roof as they descended the concrete stairs once more. The air smelled the same, wet, sour, ancient, but now it carried the weight of names. They reached room 9. Lucas paused. He placed a hand on the wall where the names were carved, let his fingers rest on the grooves of Lina and Ethan. Then he turned, crossed the narrow hall to where the old furnace stood crooked against the east wall. Sam stepped forward, kneeling beside it. "Here," he said. "These bolts were added after. You can see the welds." Lucas dropped to one knee, pressed the crowbar into the seam, and began to pry. The metal screamed, protesting after 16 years of silence. Mira stood back, flashlight steady, breath visible in the cold. After 15 minutes, the furnace groaned and shifted. Sam wedged himself into the gap. Beneath the concrete lip, under a mat of soot and debris, was a square of rusted iron with a handle nearly fused to the floor. No hinges, no number, no marking at all. Just steel and silence. Lucas reached down, took the handle and pulled. The trapdoor gave with a sound like the earth sighing. Beneath it, a stairwell, barely wide enough for one person at a time. It was darker than the first descent, and colder. A dampness rolled up from below that smelled less like water and more like sickness. Lucas clicked on his light. "We go," he said. Sam didn't argue. Mira didn't flinch. They descended into a space no one had touched since the fire. If room 9 was silence, room 10 was secrets. And this space beneath them now was something worse. It was absence. The steps ended in a narrow corridor. Walls were lined with tile, the kind found in institutional hospitals. The kind you could hose clean. The kind that was never meant to feel human. They found the first room by accident. A door with no handle, no number, no name. Lucas forced it open with the crowbar. Inside, a metal chair bolted to the floor, straps on the armrests. A two-way mirror, now cracked. In the corner, a child's shoe. Sam turned and vomited. Mira leaned into Lucas. She was shaking, but not from cold. "There are more," she said softly, and her voice quiet, strained, was a blade in the dark. They kept moving, room after room. Chair after chair, some empty, some with items still. Inside, a plastic toy, a page torn from a workbook, a paperclip bent into a shape that might have been a bird. All of them were remnants of children who'd never made it out. Lucas photographed everything, every item, every wall, every room. They reached the end of the corridor and found a set of steel lockers. One was still sealed. Sam pried it open. Inside was a box. No lock. Just a medical file folder sealed in plastic. Lucas opened it. His name was on the first page, but not Lucas Reeve. Ethan Meredith, Subject 127A, next page, Lina Meredith. Subject 127B, next page, Sam Davis. Subject 130C, a handwritten note in the margin read, "Siblings respond strongly to physical separation. Recommend observation under isolated stress conditions." Mira stepped back. Her face was blank, but her eyes glistened. Lucas turned the pages. Charts, notations, dosages. There had been drugs, tests, a schedule. Repeated entries logged under. A name he hadn't seen before, Dr. H. Winslow. Beside each entry was a number. Room 11. They hadn't seen room 11. Sam pointed to the wall. There. A hidden seam. Lucas ran his fingers along the tile, found the edge. The door wasn't locked, it just stuck. Together they shoved. It opened. Room 11 was colder than the others. It smelled like bleach and rust. The floor was linoleum, stained. On the far side of the room was a surgical table, small, child-sized. Beside it, a tray of instruments sealed in cracked plastic. A journal sat on the floor, water-damaged, warped but intact. Lucas picked it up, flipped through it. Each page was a horror. Procedures, experimental language, psych tests. Most of it coded, but there were names of children. Crossed out, marked as transferred, deceased, or withdrawn. At the bottom of the final page, one name not crossed out, Mira, the last subject, marked lost to fire, no record of survival. Lucas closed the book. His hands were shaking. They were building something here, he whispered. Not just a home, not even a lab, a system. A system built on silence. He looked at Sam, then at Mira, and we are the glitch. Mira nodded. Her voice came quiet, but unbroken. Then let's crash it. They left the basement as the sun rose. Behind them, they left the hatch open. They would not bury it again. They would not allow the world to forget what had been hidden beneath the floor. Lucas sent everything to Dawn. Files, photos, GPS, the journal. That night, the first article went live. The headline read, "State Home Hid Underground Facility for Children. Survivors Speak Out." But it wasn't the press that responded first. It was a knock at the door. A hard one. Mira moved toward the peephole. Lucas pulled her back. Sam took the bat from under the couch. The knock came again. "Lucas Reeve," a voice called. "You've made enemies." They looked at each other. Lucas stepped forward. Opened the door. A woman stood there. Not police. Not press. Something in between. She held up a card. "I'm with the Federal Investigative Oversight Commission. We've been watching this facility for years. You just gave us what we needed." Lucas stared. She smiled. "We're here to make sure no one like Relin ever builds another Room 11 again." Mira exhaled. The door closed. For the first time they were not alone. The courthouse wasn't what Myra expected. It didn't look like justice. It looked like a bank. High ceilings, polished floors, too many doors that closed too quietly. The walls smelled of lemon polish. And something colder. Institutional power. Lucas sat beside her in the waiting area outside courtroom 6B. He wore a dark suit and a pinched expression, eyes locked on the door ahead. Sam paced. His hoodie was gone, replaced by a second-hand blazer that didn't fit his shoulders right. Mira hadn't spoken since breakfast. She had tried, she really had. But the closer the trial came, the tighter her chest grew, like some invisible hand was wrapping around her throat, inch by inch. Lucas glanced at her. He leaned in. "You don't have to testify if you don't want to. We'll find another way." She shook her head, reached for her sketchpad. Scribbled one word, "Speak." He nodded. The door opened. A bailiff called his name. "Mr. Reeve, you're up first." Lucas stood. He didn't hesitate, but Mira saw the twitch in his jaw. The courtroom was crowded. Press, lawyers, survivors, spectators hungry for blood or spectacle. And on the far end, the defense team. Smooth, sharp, expensive, funded by the very people who had once buried children beneath a group home. The prosecution opened with the photos. Room 9, Room 10, Room 11, the child-sized chair. The journal. The etched names. Then Lucas took the stand. And silence fell. "Please state your name for the record," the lawyer said. Lucas looked up. "My name is Lucas Reeve," he said, voice steady. "But I was born Ethan Meredith." Gasps rippled. Cameras clicked. Mira closed her eyes. Lucas continued. "I was placed in St. Jude's Home for Children at age 6. My sister, Lena Meredith, was 4. We were marked as difficult cases, hard to place, but in reality, we were simply poor. Unwanted, the perfect targets." The lawyer nodded. "And what happened in that facility?" Lucas's eyes narrowed. "They experimented, isolated us. Split siblings to test stress responses, injections, solitary confinement. It was never a home. It was a warehouse for forgotten children. And the fire? It was intentional," he said. "A cover-up. Someone tried to burn the evidence, and they almost succeeded." A silence hung. Then the defense attorney rose. Calm, confident, poised in a tailored suit. "Mr. Reeve or Meredith? You claim to remember abuse from nearly 20 years ago, with no clear records, no surviving staff to corroborate. Isn't it possible this is trauma-enhanced memory? A fabrication?" Lucas didn't blink. I didn't fabricate the bones in that basement, the straps on the chairs, the names etched into the wall. Your sister is mute, is she not? The attorney asked. Convenient for a story that can't be cross-examined. Mira flinched. Lucas stood. She speaks, he said. She chooses who to speak to. Then he turned and looked directly at her. Mira stood. The room turned. Her feet moved. Slowly, but with purpose. The court clerk called out, but the judge didn't stop her. She stepped forward. Her voice came cracked, soft, but certain. I speak, Mira said, and I remember. The next 3 hours were not hours. They were excavation. Mira's voice trembled but didn't break. She described room 9, the cold, the dark, the names. She recited them from memory. She showed her sketchbook, the drawing she'd made of each child, one by one, face by face as they vanished. They called us subjects, she whispered. But we were just kids, kids with no parents, kids with no lawyers, kids who cried too quietly for anyone to notice. She paused. I lost my voice because I learned silence was safer. But now I know silence is what kept them in power. When she stepped down, the courtroom stood, not for verdict, not for pity, but for truth. Even the judge's hands trembled slightly as she reached for her gavel. Outside, the press surged, microphones, lights, questions. Lucas stood in front of Myra and Sam. No comments, he said. Not until this trial is over. But Myra stepped forward. She looked into the nearest camera. We were ghosts, but we're not anymore. Then she turned. There are others, still missing, still quiet. We won't stop until they're found. That night, her words led every news cycle, but justice has enemies. And power doesn't surrender easily. The next morning, an anonymous source leaked a photo of Mira, 16 years ago, with the caption, Unstable. History of institutional care. Questionable credibility. It trended. The trolls came. The threats followed. Mira didn't cry, but she stopped leaving the apartment. Sam received a message in his inbox, shut up, or disappear like the rest. Lucas found a photo slid under his door. A picture of the 3 of them, taken that morning, from across the street. Surveillance. And then, the prosecution's key piece of evidence vanished. The journal, gone. The court declared it mishandled. The trial began to falter. The defense pushed for a mistrial. Lucas met with Dawn that night. They're bleeding us, he said. Not all at once, but enough to make the public doubt. That's what they always do, she replied. Drain survivors until they become shadows again. He nodded. Then we bring them into the light. The courthouse air changed on the 4th day. Something unspoken, something cracked beneath the surface. Lucas felt it the moment he stepped into the lobby. The reporters didn't shout this time. The cameras didn't flash. They waited, hungry still, but cautious now, as if the story was shifting in a direction no one could control. Mira stood beside him, scarf wrapped tight around her neck. She hadn't spoken publicly since her words made national headlines. Not because she was afraid, but because she was choosing how and when. Sam joined them at the security checkpoint. He had shaved, bought a clean jacket. On his face, the same resolve Lucas had seen in the basement of St. Jude's. The courtroom buzzed with whispers as they entered. The defense team looked sharper than ever. New suits, new strategies, new witnesses lined up like chess pieces. But the prosecution sat taller too, because today they had someone else. A new name. A witness found not through records or subpoenas, but through the ripples of truth Mira had sent into the world. Her name was Janelle Hart, former nurse's assistant. She hadn't spoken in 16 years, not since the fire, not since she fled the state. She took the stand wearing plain black clothes, no makeup, hair tied back. Her hands trembled, but her voice did not. I worked at St. Jude's for 14 months. I started young. I thought I was helping." She paused. "I didn't know what was happening in the basement at first. They told me never to go down there. Said it was medical, that the kids being taken were sick." She looked at the jury. "Then one night I stayed late. I saw 2 staff members dragging a boy. He couldn't have been more than 8. He was screaming, begging. They told me to go back upstairs, but I followed. I watched from the stairwell. They took him to a room marked 10, locked the door. I waited for hours. He never came back." The defense objected. "Speculative, no documentation." The judge allowed it. "Continue, Miss Hart." Janelle swallowed. I tried to speak up. "I filed a report with my supervisor. The next morning, my locker was cleaned out. I was told my contract was terminated due to moral instability. That same week, I got a letter from a private law office offering me a severance package if I signed a non-disclosure." She looked at Mira. "I signed. I shouldn't have. But I was 19, alone. I thought I was crazy." Her eyes welled. "And then I saw her on the news with the sketchbook." Janelle wiped her cheek. "That's when I knew I wasn't crazy. I was just early." Mira didn't cry. She stood, walked across the courtroom, and hugged Janelle right there on the stand. The judge didn't stop her. No one did. That afternoon, the court recessed early. Outside, the crowd had tripled. Protesters now stood beside journalists. Signs reading, "Listen to the lost. Children are not experiments, and where is Relin?" waved in the October wind. But behind the noise, behind the hope, came a quiet offer. A folded note slid under their apartment door. Lucas read it 3 times before showing the others. It was from a high-level mediator, connected to the state. It offered a closed settlement, confidential payout, immediate expungement of all records related to St. Jude's. In return, silence. No more press. No more ghosts. Lucas looked at Sam. Sam shook his head. "They want to bury us again." Then he looked at Mira. She took the note, tore it in half, then quarters, then again. Lucas nodded. "We go all the way." The next day, the trial reached its tipping point. The defense brought in a new witness, a psychiatrist, one who had evaluated Mira in a facility years ago. A woman with gray eyes and a voice like a courtroom metronome. She read from a folder. Patient exhibited signs of dissociation, hallucinations, vivid trauma replay. While mute, she often described events in drawings that mixed fact with imagined elements. She looked at the jury. "In my opinion, this patient's testimony is not reliable." Mira gripped her pen. Her knuckles whitened. Lucas felt the old rage rising, but before he could stand, Sam did. "Permission to speak," he said loudly. The judge hesitated. "Mr. Davis, you're not on the schedule." "I'm on the list of survivors," Sam said. "That's all that should matter." The judge allowed it. Sam walked to the front. No lawyer, no paper, just his voice. "I didn't speak for 16 years. I watched people call me a liar, say I made it up. But let me ask you this: how does a lie leave scars?" He rolled up his sleeve, showed a burn mark on his shoulder. "How does a lie remember names no one ever told me? How does a lie match exactly what she drew?" He pointed to Mira. "I watched that girl survive what would have killed me. I watched her lose her voice and still come back swinging." He turned to the defense. "You want to say we're unreliable? Fine, but if the system had been reliable, we wouldn't be standing here now." The courtroom held its breath. The judge called a recess. Later that evening, Dawn called. Her voice was clipped. "They're scared," she said. "I got word someone's trying to flee the country. Dr. Winslow, the one who ran room 11. You remember that name?" Lucas remembered. "Can you stop him?" "I'm working on it," Dawn said. "But you've started something, and they don't know how to contain it." 2 days later, the verdict came. Not from the jury, not yet, but from the world. Over 1.3 million signatures flooded a petition to reopen all closed cases, linked to state-run children's homes between 1980 and 2005. News anchors cried on air. Schools held moments of silence. And in the courtroom, something shifted. For once, the survivors weren't just subjects. They were witnesses. They were names. They were proof. The betrayal came from someone they never saw coming. Not a lawyer. Not a staff member, but one of their own. His name was Avery Blaine, a survivor who had joined their press calls, stood with them in early interviews, and held Mira's hand outside the courthouse on the second day. He was older, maybe in his 30s, soft-spoken, carried a Bible in his pocket like armor. When he came forward to testify, no one questioned it, not until the words turned sharp. "I believe something happened at St. Jude's," he began. "I was there. I remember the fire, the confusion. But I also remember people helping us. Staff risking their lives, not harming us." Lucas sat forward in his seat. Mira's spine went rigid. Sam stared. Avery continued, voice steady. "What's happening here is a rewriting of history through trauma. I believe the prosecution is sincere, but mistaken. Memory is not fact." The courtroom buzzed. The defense looked smug. Avery's testimony went on for 20 minutes. By the time he stepped down, the seed of doubt had been planted. Mira didn't move, not during cross-examination, not during lunch break. She sat in the hallway, staring at the wall, sketchbook untouched. "He was one of us," Sam said quietly. Lucas didn't answer. Not yet. Later that night, Dawn sent over an encrypted file. "I think you should see this." It was footage. Old surveillance. Unreleased. A backup drive they hadn't known existed until a former janitor from St. Felix's finally came forward. Lucas clicked play. The footage showed a hallway in St. Jude's. A child being led into room 9. The staff member was blurry, but the name tag glinted once in the grainy footage. A Blaine. Avery hadn't been a survivor. He'd been staff, embedded, hidden among them for years. Lucas exhaled slowly. "We show this tomorrow." Dawn hesitated. "Are you sure? If this goes public?" He made himself public. "Now we do the same." Mira looked up from her chair. She didn't speak. She just nodded. The next morning, Lucas submitted the video as evidence. The defense objected. The judge allowed it. When the footage played, Avery's face paled. He stood, tried to speak, but the courtroom was no longer his. Mira rose from her seat. Quiet, composed. She approached the stand without being called. "Permission to address the court," she said, her voice stronger than it had ever been. The judge looked at her, then nodded. Mira stood before the jury. Her fingers shook, but her eyes were steady. "I have been erased before," she began. "When I was a child, they said I didn't matter. When I tried to speak, they said I was broken. When I drew pictures, they said I was imagining things. But I remember." She turned toward Avery. "And I remember you." Gasps echoed. "You were there. You wore gloves so no one saw the scars. You told me I was lucky I had a brother." She paused. "You were the first person to hold me down in that chair." Silence. "But you won't be the last person to regret it." She looked back at the jury. "Believe what you want. I didn't come for revenge. I came because there are still children like us. Right now, today. And if we don't tell the truth, who will?" She stepped down. Lucas took her hand. Sam's jaw was tight, but his eyes were glassy. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. When they returned, the judge asked for silence. The foreperson stood. "On count 1, criminal negligence resulting in harm to minors, we find the defendants guilty." A wave broke. "On count 2, obstruction of justice and conspiracy to destroy public records, We find the defendants guilty. On count 3, misuse of government authority for illegal experimentation, we find the defendants. The pause was forever. Guilty. The gavel dropped. The courtroom didn't cheer. It didn't erupt. It wept, quietly, collectively, the kind of cry that doesn't need to be loud to be true. Outside, cameras flashed again. But this time, it wasn't about headlines. It was about evidence. Lucas, Mira, and Sam stood side by side on the steps. Dawn joined them. The federal agents behind her nodded once. "We got warrants," she whispered. "Not just St. Jude's, we're reopening everything. 47 facilities. 15 states. This isn't the end. It's the start." Lucas looked at Mira. Mira stepped forward. She opened her sketchbook, held up the first page. A drawing of a small girl sitting on a step, eyes wide, silent. Behind her, shadows. But above her, light breaking through. "This is for the ones we didn't find in time," she said. "But from now on, we look harder." That night, as the city buzzed with the fallout, as headlines changed and records burned, the apartment went quiet. Sam curled up on the sofa, with a blanket and a book. Lucas stood at the window, staring at a street that no longer felt so heavy. Mira sat by the table. And for the first time, she drew something without shadows. A tree, a swing, 2 kids, a dog. And beneath it, in her own handwriting, "We are not what they did to us. We are what we chose to become after. The letter came on a Monday. It arrived without ceremony, no official stamp, no courier, just a thin envelope slipped beneath the door of the small apartment Lucas now shared with Mira and, intermittently, Sam. Mira found it first. She stepped over it on her way to the kitchen, thinking it was another flyer, but something made her turn back. The paper was thick. Not white, cream, expensive. She picked it up, eyes scanning the return address. There was none. Just her name. Lena Meredith, the name she'd left behind years ago, before she'd learned to call herself Mira, before the fire, before the basement, before silence became her mother tongue. She didn't open it. Not yet. She slid it onto the kitchen table and began to make tea, fingers trembling slightly as the kettle clicked on. Lucas came home 20 minutes later. He'd been at the new commission's office, the Federal Child Welfare Oversight Board. A task force built out of the verdict, created to audit the very system that once buried him. He looked older somehow, not from exhaustion, but from the strange weight that comes when your enemy becomes your job. He kissed her forehead, saw the envelope, froze. Who uses that name now? Mira shook her head, handed it to him. Lucas turned it over, no markings, just her name. He opened it carefully, like peeling back skin. Inside was a single sheet of paper, handwritten. "Lina, you don't know me, but I know you. I saw your picture in the paper after the trial. Your name lit something inside me. I think I was with you once, in a place with metal walls and cold lights. I remember drawing, and someone took the crayons. You gave me one back, green. You said it was lucky. My name's Jonah. I'm in Fairburn home now. They say it's safe, but some of the doors still lock from the outside. I still draw. I still wait. Please come if you can. If you're real." Jonah, room 14. Lucas read it 3 times. Then again, just to be sure. Mira didn't cry, but she sat down hard, as if her legs gave way. Then she reached for her coat. Fairburn home sat 2 counties over. A former juvenile detention center repurposed into a therapeutic residential environment, which was code for a place you put kids who scared you but didn't break the law. It was clean, stark, gray on gray. The receptionist wore a white smile and offered water before asking them to sign in. No visitors without clearance. No walk-ins. No siblings unless bloodline was proven. But Lucas had learned things since the trial. He showed the badge, temporary, federal, but effective. and within minutes they were being led through sterile halls by a nervous administrator named Ms. Delaney, who smiled too much and explained too little. Room 14 was at the end of the hall. Jonah was 8 thin, watchful. He sat on a bare mattress with a spiral notebook on his lap. When he saw Mira, his face didn't light up, it steadied. Like something inside him had found gravity again. She crossed the room slowly, sat on the floor beside him, no words. Just presence. He opened the notebook, showed her the drawings. They weren't childish. They were maps, corridors, hatch marks, numbered rooms, a square labeled stairs, another labeled steel door, a jagged edge with the word noise. Lucas sat beside them, studied the pages. It wasn't Fairburn. It was something else. Where is this, Jonah? He asked. Gently. The boy hesitated, looked at Mira, then whispered, the place before. They said I was never there. But I remember the lights. I remember the chair. Mira took his hand, and Lucas knew. Then, they weren't done. The trial had exposed one layer, but the network ran deeper, wider, still breathing under the skin of the system. Sam returned that night, tracking mud on the floor and carrying a backpack that looked far too heavy. He hadn't told them where he was going. But now, back in the apartment, he emptied the bag onto the table. File folders, VHS tapes, a key. Found another archive, he said simply. Not everything burned in the fire. Lucas stared. Mira smiled, just barely. Sam pointed to one tape, labeled in faded ink. Subject 014. Transfer protocol, Dr. H. Winslow. The number matched Jonah's room. Lucas exhaled. Then it wasn't just St. Jude's. No, Sam said. It never was. The next morning, Lucas woke early. The apartment was silent. Too silent. The kind that didn't feel peaceful, but heavy. Mira was already at the table, pencil moving across her sketchpad like it had a mind of its own. She didn't notice him at first. When she did, she slid the page toward him. It was Jonah, but not as he was now. As he might have looked years ago, younger, smaller, eyes wide and terrified, sitting in a room that mirrored the ones from St. Jude's. Behind him, another figure. Not staff, another child. A girl with white hair and a scar on her cheek. No name written beside her. Lucas studied the drawing. You remember her? Mira nodded. Wrote 2 words on the edge of the page, still breathing. She didn't mean it. Metaphorically. Not this time. Sam confirmed it 2 hours later. He slid a flash drive into Lucas's laptop, pulled up a video from a hidden server in an abandoned municipal health department website. The footage was grainy, time-stamped 5 years ago, showing a transfer between facilities. A young girl, pale, scarred, being loaded into a van. The file name read, Subject X Location, Haven Facility, Status, Deferred. Lucas blinked. Deferred? Sam's voice was flat. It means someone blocked her death certificate. Lucas exhaled. So she's alive? Sam nodded. Or was 5 years ago? They stared at the screen. Mira reached forward, typed 1 word in the search bar. Haven. Nothing. Then she typed again. Deferred facilities. A single hit. Hidden in a subcontractor database. Haven. Therapeutic detention wing. Not on state registry. Privately funded. Restricted jurisdiction. Lucas sat back. Of course it's off the books. It's how they stayed alive after St. Jude's went public. They just moved. Sam leaned in. We need to go. They left that night. No announcement. No trail. Jonah was placed temporarily under the protection of an external advocate. Mira kissed his forehead before leaving. He didn't ask where she was going. He just handed her a page torn from his sketchbook, a drawing of her holding a torch. The car ride was quiet. Haven facility sat 3 hours north, beyond a line of pine trees and snow-heavy hills. No signage, no guard post. Just a rusted gate and a long gravel road. They parked half a mile out and walked the rest on foot. The air was bitter, the kind of cold that burned your lungs when you breathed too hard. At the end of the road stood a structure that looked abandoned, a shell of concrete and broken windows. But beneath the surface, the cameras blinked. Lucas saw them first. Infrared. Hidden in the tree line. Sam pulled out a small radio scrambler, swept the perimeter. They're listening. Mira crouched near the foundation, fingers brushing along the stone. Then she stood, pointed toward the east wall. A door, metal, sealed. No handle. Just a keypad. Lucas stared. Same design as the one under St. Jude's. Sam knelt, pulled out a tool. Give me 2 minutes. Mira stood watch, every muscle in her frame wound tight. The wind moved through the trees, and for a moment it sounded like whispering. Then, click. The door opened. They stepped into dark. The hallway smelled like bleach and rust. The floors were too clean. The silence too manufactured. Lucas's flashlight swept the hall. Numbers etched into steel plates. R14, R16. Sam whispered, "We're back in it." At R18, they stopped. Behind the small, square window, a girl. Pale, thin, white hair. She turned when the light hit her. And Mira gasped. It wasn't memory playing tricks. It was her, the girl from the sketch. One everyone thought was dead. She pressed her palm to the glass. Lucas tried the handle. Lock. Sam started working the panel. The girl stared at Mira, then traced a word on the fogged window. Run. Too late. The alarm exploded. Red lights slamming shut. In footsteps, heavy, fast, from the opposite corridor. Lucas grabbed Mira's hand. Sam yanked the panel off the wall and slammed the lock. Override. The door hissed open. Mira rushed inside. The girl collapsed in her arms. Lucas spun to face the corridor. Crowbar raised, but the footsteps stopped, then retreated. Someone had triggered the alarm, and then let them go. Sam turned. It's a trap. Lucas looked at the girl, or a test. They didn't wait to find out. They carried her out under moonlight, back through snow, through trees, through the edge of the world that was still pretending not to know. They got her back to the city, checked her in under false credentials. The hospital staff didn't ask questions. The girl, whose name was Maureen, didn't speak for the first 24 hours. She just slept. Then, on the second morning, Mira sat beside her and drew a flower. Marin blinked. Then picked up a pen, wrote, with shaking hand, "I never thought I'd see anyone who remembered." Mira smiled. Didn't speak. Just reached out. And held her hand. Marin spoke on the fourth night. Just 2 words, "I remember." They came out like something ancient, as if they'd waited years behind her teeth. Mira sat beside her, said nothing. Lucas watched. From the hallway, the hospital door slightly ajar. Sam stood behind him with 2 coffees and a folder. "She's been seen before," Sam said, tapping the file. "Her name appeared on a list 5 years ago during an internal investigation. Nothing came of it." Lucas raised an eyebrow. "Because she died?" "No," Sam replied. "Because they said she never existed." He handed the folder over. This is what Haven was for. Not just holding kids, erasing them, officially, digitally, biologically. He pulled out another page, and they weren't the only site. Lucas scanned the document. "How many?" 17. "That we know of." Sam's jaw clenched. 4 still active. Or at least still receiving funding through shell nonprofits. Lucas exhaled. "We're gonna need more than testimony. We're going to need a map." Mira entered the hall. Her face was calm, but Lucas recognized the shift in her shoulders. Something had clicked. She walked straight to the kitchen table, pulled out her sketchpad, and began drawing. Not faces, not children, not trauma. Blueprints. "She remembers the structure," Myra said. "She remembers the hallways. The placement of the doors. She couldn't speak, so she memorized. Sam leaned over the paper, stunned. She built a diagram in her head. Mira nodded. And she said the place she was taken to after Haven wasn't a facility, it was a house. Lucas frowned. Private? Worse, Mira said. Hidden. Funded by someone trying to separate from the main network. A splinter. Like a rogue branch trying to go off book. Any names? Sam asked. Mira shook her head. Only a nickname. The cartographer. Lucas looked up sharply. I've heard that before. Where? Dawn mentioned it once. Said there was a donor who always showed up in the paperwork. Never directly named, but traced through real estate. Sam was already opening his laptop. Give me 3 hours. You've got one, Lucas replied. We don't know how long we're safe. That night, Mira sat by Marin's bedside. The girl slept fitfully, mumbling names in her sleep. Some real, some imagined, some blurred by time. Mira didn't try to wake her. She just held her hand. And in the dark, she began to hum. It was a tune her mother used to sing. The same mother Myra hadn't seen since before St. Jude's. She didn't know if it was real, but it felt real enough to keep singing. Lucas watched her from the doorway. And for a second, he let himself hope, but peace never lasted long. The next morning, they found a white envelope slipped under the hospital room door. Inside, a photograph. Black dash and dash white. A child in a hospital gown, strapped to a chair, face half obscured. Lucas's name written. In the corner in ink, Ethan. He stared at it. His knees buckled. Mira caught him. He'd thought the worst of his memories came from St. Jude's. But this photo was earlier, younger. He'd never been told where he was before the group home. Now he knew. Someone else had owned him before. Sam studied the photo. This is a warning. Whoever sent this knows we're getting close. Lucas nodded. His voice was hoarse. Then we keep going. 2 days later, Mira was invited to speak at a national conference on child protection reform. Ire was invited to speak at a national conference on child protection reform. The child protection reform. Crayon was invited to speak at a national conference on child D.C. It was to be her first public appearance since the trial. Not just as a survivor, but as a builder of something new. The panel was televised. Broadcast live. Mira wore a plain black dress. No makeup, her hair tied back the way she always had as a child, before everything was taken. She stepped onto the stage. The lights burned. But she didn't flinch. A moderator introduced her, read a short biography. The crowd applauded. Then Mira stepped to the podium. Silence fell. And then she spoke. I used to think silence was survival, she said. I thought the quieter I became, the longer I'd live. The safer I'd be. But silence wasn't safety. It was a tool they used to keep us from each other. If you don't tell your story, they can tell it for you. Or worse, erase it completely. She paused. The crowd held its breath. I am not a case number. I am not a syndrome. I am not a survivor because of what happened to me. I am a survivor because I decided to keep choosing to live, even when they told me I didn't exist. She looked out at the room. At least 4 facilities are still active. Children are still inside them. Somewhere right now, a kid is being told they imagined their pain. That's why we speak. That's why we remember, not to dwell, but to protect. If we're loud enough, they can't bury us again. The crowd stood. The applause thundered. And in that moment, Mira didn't feel small. She felt permanent. But when she stepped backstage, her phone buzzed. One new message. A number she didn't recognize. She opened it. A single sentence. You still haven't found the cartographer's daughter. She dropped the phone. Lucas caught it before it hit the floor. The screen went black. And the war that had gone quiet began again. The air changed before the knock came. It was late, sometime after 3 a.m. The kind of hour where dreams bleed into nightmares and the city forgets how to breathe. Mira woke first. Not to sound, but to stillness. That kind of wrong silence that the body recognizes before the mind catches up. Then came the knock. 3 short taps. Precise, like a signature. Lucas was up instantly, shirt half buttoned, already crossing the floor. Sam was sleeping on the couch. A half-finished file folder spilled across his chest. He woke to Mira's whisper. It's happening. Lucas opened the door. Nothing. No person. Just a single box. Inside, a flash drive, a photo, and a child's toy. A cracked wooden block with the letter E burned into it. The photo was worse. It showed the entrance to a foster home in as a child's tom and a child's off of the letter E burned into it. The photo was worse. It showed the entrance to a foster home in Tafayole, Queens that Lucas had visited just a week ago, part of a routine check for one of the kids who'd testified anonymously at the trial. The porch was empty, the windows shattered, and scrawled on the front door in spray paint, "Return to silence." Lucas dropped the photo. Mira picked up the flash drive. 10 minutes later, they were huddled around Sam's laptop. The footage that played had no timecode, just a static camera feed. It showed a hallway, narrow, windowless, familiar. A child, maybe 6, walked across the screen, dragged by someone in a white coat. Then the frame cut, jumped. And another child appeared, then another. All timestamp gaps were less than 2 minutes. Lucas leaned forward. They're accelerating. Sam didn't speak. He just nodded once, then stood. We have to move, now, before they make us vanish too. They left Brooklyn before sunrise. Sam drove. Lucas took phone calls. Dawn was already assembling a task force to raid Haven's secondary site, but the cartographer's identity remained elusive. Mira said nothing for most of the ride. She just clutched the wooden block and remembered. The memory didn't come in a flood. It came in a scratch. A sound that lived beneath her ears for years without a name. Then a shape, then a door, a woman's voice. You're my little compass, Lina. You always point to what matters. Mira blinked. She hadn't heard that name in months, but it wasn't the name that scared her. It was the voice. And the scent that came with it, lavender oil and blood. She dropped the block. Lucas caught it before it hit the floor. Mira? He asked, but she wasn't there anymore. In her mind, she was back in the room. The one before St. Jude's. The one with the locked toy chest. The maps on the wall. The woman who wore gloves when she touched her. Not to keep Mira clean, but to keep herself from leaving fingerprints. And now the memory had a name. Dr. Helena Vale. Dr. Helena Vale, not a ghost. Not a legend. The Cartographer. Her mother. The name sat between them like a bomb. Dr. Helena Vale. Mira hadn't spoken it aloud. She didn't have to. Sam and Lucas read it in her eyes, the way a person reads the tide before a storm. She's not dead, Mira finally said, her voice hollow. She never was. She just became harder to find. Sam didn't ask how she knew. He reached for his tablet, already searching. Lucas leaned forward. You said she wore gloves, Myra nodded. Always, even when she bathed me. She called it clinical attachment. Side touch was a contaminant. Her fingers curled. She called me her compass. I thought it meant I mattered. I didn't realize it meant I was leading her to others. They were parked on the side of a highway in Pennsylvania now, just outside the supposed location of one of the splinter homes, off-book facilities not yet shut down. But this was no concrete building. It was a farmhouse. Painted white, pristine. A swing set out front. A mailbox with no name. Lucas frowned. Looks like a vacation rental. Sam opened the trunk. Looks like a facade. They approached. Carefully. Mira held back at first, but then her pace quickened. As if her legs remembered this place, even if her mouth wouldn't admit it. They reached the front door. It wasn't locked. That should have been the first warning. Inside, the air was sterile, not just clean scrubbed. As if emotion had been disinfected. The walls were bare, the furniture too perfect. A fireplace with unlit logs. Toys arranged on shelves with eerie symmetry. No dust, no mess, no noise. They split up. Lucas took the basement. Sam checked the attic. Mira drifted toward the back of the house like something was pulling her. She found the door tucked behind a sliding panel, a narrow stairwell, leading downward. She knew it without seeing it. Room 0, the one without a name. Sam found the files in the attic, locked in a chest beneath a false floorboard. He didn't shout. He brought them down slowly, one by one, heart racing with every name he saw. Children, dozens, some listed as relocated, others reclaimed. And one file, thicker than the rest, stamped with a single letter, M. Inside, photos of Mira as a child, medical reports, behavior logs, psychological notes in handwriting Sam instantly recognized from the trial transcripts, Dr. Helena Vale. And at the bottom, a note dated 3 weeks prior, status, observed near trial site. Emotional deviation increasing. Exposure may trigger latent regression. Proceed to stage 4 if reactivation persists. Sam read it 3 times. Stage IV. He didn't want to know what that meant, but he ran downstairs anyway, because Mira was already gone. Lucas found the basement mostly empty. A table, a chair, a camera mounted in the corner, a chain bolted to the floor. Not old, clean, recently used. But what made him freeze was the recording light on the camera. Still blinking. Someone had watched them enter, and someone had already left. Mira's scream came from behind the false wall. He ran, behind the panel. Mira stood in a room she hadn't seen in years, but had drawn thousands of times. A lab masquerading as a nursery. Half toys, half wires, monitors in the corners. And in the center, a crib, empty. But it wasn't the emptiness that made her scream. It was the recording playing on the screen. A girl, small, pale, white blonde hair, her strapped to a table. A woman beside her. The woman's voice was calm. You are the center, the root, the compass. When they try to erase you, we start again, because the map lives in your blood. The woman turned slightly. Her face wasn't blurred. It was Mira, older, cold. Not her now, her later. Lucas reached her just as the screen shut off. She was trembling. Sam caught up a moment later, eyes wide, holding the files. We have to leave. They're burning the other homes. Erasing the trail. This one's already been dumped. This was just set dressing. The real operations moved underground. Lucas turned to Myra. What did you see? She didn't answer. Her eyes were still locked on the blank screen. Then, I'm not the cartographer's daughter. Lucas frowned. But, I'm her prototype, Myra said, voice cracked. She cloned the design from me, and the girl in the video. That wasn't me anymore. That's who she wants me to become. Sam whispered, she's making copies. Mira nodded, and I think one of them is already out. The footage aired on a Tuesday morning. No warning, no credits. Just a leak. Uploaded simultaneously to over 300 burner accounts. Blasted through encrypted apps, framed to look like whistleblower. Truth. It showed Mira, or someone who looked like her, inside a facility filled with children. Holding clipboards. Giving instructions, calm, authoritative. The caption read, Victim turned villain? Trial star Mira Meredith linked to underground testing sites. Lucas got the alert first. Then Sam. By the time they reached Myra, the video had already gone viral. She sat motionless, her phone buzzing on the counter like it had a heartbeat. Headlines were flipping. All eyes hesitating. Advocacy groups pulling statements. Dawn left a voice message. We'll sort this. Don't say anything until we verify. Stay safe. But Mira didn't need verification. She knew what she was looking at. It wasn't deep fake. It was real footage of someone using her face. She cloned me, Mira whispered. Lucas's voice was taut. How is that even possible? She didn't need to clone me physically, Mira replied. Just behaviorally, surgically, systematically. Helena doesn't need flesh copies. She builds them through trauma. She makes you believe you're someone else until the original becomes obsolete. Sam slammed a fist on the table. She's replacing you, Myra looked up. No, she's replacing us, Lucas blinked. You mean she's building a whole new class of survivors. Manufactured, controlled, story perfect, so when the next wave hits, and people come asking where the kids went, they'll point to the survivors, Sam finished. And never look behind the curtain. Lucas stood. We stop this, we find the origin point, we expose the real Helena. Sam dropped a file on the table, already working on it. The footage's metadata pinged one server location. Offshore. But mirrored through a corporate server right here in Maryland. Lucas opened the folder. A name stared back at him. Hesper Data Wellness Institute. Beneath it, founder, Dr. Helen V. Crow. Myra's hands trembled. She changed her name. Sam nodded. She changed her name. Not her tactics. They drove south through the night. The facility sat in the woods, behind a false front, a holistic retreat for stress reduction, with brochures, yoga instructors, and glowing reviews. But behind the spa facade, the building stretched underground. Sam hacked the visitor logs, cross-referenced timestamps, matched entries, 47 names. 12 of them children, all tagged with initials only. No exits recorded. They broke in just before midnight. Security was light. Too light. Inside, it looked like a luxury clinic. Marble floors, warm lighting, ocean sounds playing on speakers. But Mira didn't buy it. She moved like a tuning fork, drawn toward pressure points invisible to others. They found the real entrance behind a meditation wall. Down another level. The light changed, cooler, harsher, buzzing. And in the far room, a mirror, a long glass wall, one side reflecting, the other transparent. On the far side, a girl sat cross-legged on the floor. She looked up. Identical to Mira, younger, more poised. Dressed in white. She smiled. Hello, sister. Lucas nearly broke the glass. Mira stopped him. She stepped forward, face unreadable. What's your name? The girl tilted her head. They called me Echo, but she said I could earn a real one. Once the world forgets you. Myra's voice cracked. Do you know what she did to you? Of course, Echo smiled. She gave me a purpose. I'm not confused like you. I know where I came from. I know where I'm going. And where's that? Echo leaned forward. Into the world, to replace what they lost faith in. We are the new control group. The version they don't have to worry about. Lucas stepped beside Myra. You're not her. You're not real. Echo blinked slowly. Neither are you. Not anymore. The lights above flickered. A voice came through the intercom. Warm, polished. Helena. Vale, Lena. You always did lead me exactly where I needed to go. I'm so proud of you. Even now, even with your little rebellion. Look at what you've built. Noise, hope, resistance. It's beautiful. But flawed. Mira stepped closer to the wall. Where are the children? Helena's voice didn't flinch. Gone to better places. You'd be surprised what people will approve with the right paperwork. Some are overseas. Some still here. Waiting, Myra whispered. You're going to erase us. You're erasing yourself, darling. Every time you speak, they call you unstable. Every time you fight, they see violence. You're doing my work for me. Sam yanked the power cable on the wall. The feed cut, but the damage was done. They got out. Barely. Sam wiped the surveillance systems. Lucas sent encrypted files to Dawn and 6 journalists. Mira took the child files, Echo's origin charts, and sent them directly to every survivor they knew. The next morning, the real Mira held a press conference, unannounced. In the rain, in front of the courthouse where it all began. She brought the toy block, the files, the photo of the false her. And she said, "They tried to vanish us. Then they tried to replace us. Now they want to forget us. But we're still here." Echo escaped the facility hours later. No one knows how. But a week after the press conference, another video surfaced. This time of a child, alone in a subway station, whispering Myra's name, then vanishing into a van. The war wasn't over, but neither were they. The city was louder after the storm. Or maybe Mira was just more aware of it, the way buses wheezed against the curb, the way sirens didn't apologize anymore, the way the wind carried conversations from windows too thin for privacy. She sat on the rooftop of the safe house, arms wrapped around her knees, watching the clouds drift like slow-moving wreckage. Below her, the world tried to return to normal, but there was no returning now. The footage of Echo had changed everything. The public was torn. Some believed the clone narrative. Others believed Mira had a mental break and was hallucinating her own double. Conspiracies bloomed like mold. The children Mira had helped rescue were now pawns in debates she never wanted to exist. Her inbox was a battlefield. Praise, death threats, pleas for help, journalists begging for interviews, podcasters offering platforms to reclaim her story. But Mira had nothing left to say. Not yet. Not until she found the last child. Her name was Ella. 6 years old, no listed guardians. No photos, just a flicker of her name in a foster registry 6 months earlier. One of the few who had come in contact with Echo before the media storm broke. The last child linked to Helena's project. And she was gone. Sam traced the van from the subway camera to a toll road on the outskirts of Connecticut. Then it vanished, not by magic, but by tech, signal scramblers, off-grid rerouting, a convoy of ghost vehicles. Lucas didn't ask how Sam got access to federal satellites. He just packed a bag. They left that night. No headlines. No announcements. Just 2 men and a woman the world no longer trusted, chasing the truth after the noise had faded. The coordinates led them to the edge of a state forest. No signs. No trail markers. Just pine and dirt and something Mira recognized in her skin. "This is where I was meant to end," she said quietly. Sam frowned. "What?" But Lucas understood. Not physically. Narratively. Helena had written her daughter's ending a long time ago. This was the stage. All they had to do was walk into it. They found the bunker at dawn. Half buried, cloaked in ivy, disguised as a weather station. No guards, just sensors. Sam disabled them in under 5 minutes. The hatch groaned open. The smell hit first, bleach, earth, and something faintly metallic. They moved in silence, down 2 levels. Through a corridor of old computers, unplugged monitors, and medical gurneys, pushed into corners like forgotten thoughts. No movement. Until they reached the 3rd door on the left. Inside, Ella sitting on the floor, playing with a torn doll. She looked up when Mira entered, not afraid. Just curious. "You're the one from the screen," she said. "The real one." Mira knelt. "You know who I am?" Ella nodded. "She said you'd come. But you were broken. She said you'd fall apart before you got here." Myra swallowed. "Who told you that?" A voice from the speaker above answered. "Helena, you're early, Lina." Myra stood. "I'm not Lina anymore." "Of course you are. You'll always be my little compass." "No," Myra said, stepping closer to the speaker. "You used me. You broke children in my name. You made versions of me because you couldn't control the real one. I improved on you. You erased yourself in the process. And yet, here we are." The voice cut, But the door behind them didn't lock. They were free to go. Sam grabbed Ella gently. Lucas checked the hallway. Mira turned one last time toward the speaker. "I'm not your ending," she whispered. They emerged into sunlight. The birds were louder than before. Back in the city, the headlines didn't stop. But they began to shift. Testimonies, documents, GPS footage, survivor coalitions. The story fractured, and then something strange. Echo turned herself in. She arrived outside a news station barefoot, carrying a flash drive, and asked for Mira by name. When the police took her in, she didn't resist. She just said, "She was right. I wasn't supposed to survive, but I want to now." The footage on the flash drive was everything. Proof of manipulation, proof of fabrication, proof of who Helena really was. And the program she had moved. Offshore. The world watched and began to believe, not just in Mira, but in all of them. Myra didn't give speeches after that. She declined interviews. She stayed off social media. She opened a center in Brooklyn. No sign, no logo. Just a small red door. Inside, there were art supplies, music rooms, and a library of books the state once banned from children in care. Sam ran logistics. Lucas taught creative writing. Mira sat with the kids. Drew with them. Listened. Every once in a while, a new child would walk through the red door, silent, shaking, unsure. And Mira would offer them a crayon. Green. For luck. One day, Ella asked her if she was ever afraid the cartographer would come back. Mira smiled. "No," she said. "Because if she does, we're louder now." She found her voice. She helped others find theirs. And in the quiet after everything, she proved silence doesn't mean forgotten. If this story moved you, subscribe for more, because someone else out there still needs to be heard.